People are getting sick every day in prison. What you do, lock them up in a room, or you get some people that, don't mind doing it. And there's a lot of guys in these yards that want to do it. The feeling that you get back from them, you can't even describe it.
Welcome back to Inside City Hall. That was a clip from the Oscar-nominated documentary Prison Terminal, The Last Days of Private Jack Hall. It's premiering next week on HBO. The film is a deeply moving look at the final months in the life of a terminally ill man who is behind bars, and it highlights an often overlooked issue that is gaining more attention here in New York. That's the often invisible population of aging and sick prisoners. Joining us now to talk more about this is Edgar Barens. He is the filmmaker behind Prison Terminal. We're also joined tonight by Liz Gaynes. She's the executive director of the Osborne Association, a group here in New York that works with prisoners and with their families. First, I have to say, wow, that was a very difficult film to watch and an important film to watch as well. Why did you make it?
Well, I became aware of the issue of the growing elderly population in prison and the fact that most people that die in prison do not die a dignified death. Most of them are either they die alone in their cell or in an infirmary or at a university hospital or state hospital chained to the bed with a guard outside the door. So it's a huge issue, and it needs, I think, the system needs to change because I think these people deserve more than just, I think they deserve a dignified death.
The stats that you put out, a fifth of all prisoners right now are elderly, like 20%, and that's projected to account for a third with only a few years from now. So this is a problem that's not going away.
It's not a problem that's going away, and actually it's hitting the fan right now because of our sentencing, our long sentencing. People are aging out in prison, so we're going to face a huge crisis of many, many people getting ill in prison and really nothing to do.
Let's set up a clip from the film because the treatment there that we just saw just didn't do it justice. Set up what we're going to see now from a clip from the documentary that's going to be shown on HBO.
Okay. Because Jack accepted to go into the hospice program in the prison, the prison hospice program at the Iowa State Penitentiary is holistic, like most hospice programs. So they not only deal with the prisoner, but they also deal with the family, dealing with the fact that their loved one is passing away. So one of the bonuses of having a prison hospice is that they allow families into the infirmary around the clock, really. So they can go there, especially around the clock during the time of death, so they can be there with their loved one. So in this scene, we see Don coming back for the first time.
That's his son, Jack's son.
Yeah, Jack's son, Don, going back to the prison hospice for the first time to see his father in that setting. Now, earlier they would visit in the visiting room when Jack was healthy, but this is the first time that a family member is actually going into the prison hospice infirmary.
Okay, let's take a look.
Morning.
Morning.
By golly. Call the conference at home. How you doing? Not too bad. Listen, nice. Gee, bad. That's all right, Dan. I think the only thing you don't have is a warm body to crawl up next to. I wouldn't know what to do with it.
Liz, let's bring you into the conversation. What is the situation with elderly prisoners in New York? Is it the same kind of percentage? And is there a similar program where those who are dying can go to a place where they're afforded the same kind of dignity, as Edgar said, as there is in Iowa?
Well, in New York, we do have regional medical units, and there's an Alzheimer's unit, but the focus we have, and it is in New York, there's 9,200 elders in prison, which is a significant proportion. Most of them have been there for a very long time because of the sentencing problems. So our focus largely is to get people out. Our view is that if some of these guys don't even remember why they're there, so whatever the punitive value was of putting them there. So while it's very important that if they have to die in prison, that it's with as much dignity as possible, there's really, for us, a question as to why can't we just get them home, which would be a more dignified way.
Do some of these prisoners, though, have, everyone has a family, but do they have necessarily places, and are they necessarily better off going home? You see all sorts of cases of people getting so used to being in prison life that they wouldn't know what to do once they go into the other side, particularly if they've been there for 20, 30, 40 years.
If you ask every prisoner I've ever asked what is their biggest fear, it is to die in prison. People want to die in the free world, and they want to be buried and handled in the free world. It is true that there aren't as many options for them as we would like them to be. Medicare won't pay for people if they're on parole. And there is certainly an effort to be as humane as possible with people who are in, but it's very hard. If you see the entire documentary, you see him in a bed, unable to move and shackled. There is no reason for that. He's in a maximum security prison. He couldn't possibly go anywhere. And so no matter how much dignity you want to put in it, at the end of the day, you really have to question if somebody is that far gone, why do you need to have correction officers moving them shackled?
Do you agree? This was when Jack was taken to the hospital, which is outside the prison grounds. First of all, set us up a little bit about who Jack Hall was. I think it's fair to say that he went to hospice. That's probably not ruining anything for the fact that we see him at the end of his life. How did you find him, and how did you get him to cooperate, and the prison to cooperate, in telling the story with such remarkable access?
I'll try to put it in a nutshell. I had worked for the Open Society Institute 15 years ago, and I made a short film on the same topic, but I focused on a prison down in Louisiana, in Angola, and they had a very progressive prison hospice program, especially for Louisiana to have such a progressive. Angola, for example, that has a horrible prison history, so for them to have this program was amazing. So I did a short film about their prison hospice, and I wanted to do something much deeper, much more in depth, because I was only there for 2 weeks, and I really would love to I wanted to do much more justice to the topic. So I found out 10 years later, after I moved back to Chicago, that the Iowa State Penitentiary had a similar hospice program. They just started it a year ago. So I went there kind of cold turkey and said, look, I want to be in this prison for a year and follow one of your inmates going through the whole, from diagnosis of terminal illness to death. And I know that your program is based on the Angola program. Unbeknownst to me, they were actually using my earlier film as a teaching tool. So I think with that under my belt, they trusted me and they knew my work, and they were basing their hospice classes on my earlier film. So they gave me 1 year of 24/7 access to the maximum security prison.
Were you there all the time?
I was there for 6 months. Solid 6 months, and after that 6 months,
Did you leave? You were there during some very pivotal times in this man's life.
I never left. I left twice when I was there for 6 months.
You stayed in the prison for 6 months and never left.
Now, I initially asked if I could stay in the prison, which was probably ridiculous. The warden said, "There's no way we're going to put you in a prison cell for a year." But they said, "We'll do you next better. We'll put you across the street. The houses across the street from the prison where they put the doctors during the week. They're on call. There was a basement in one of the houses, and they let me set up my production office, and I just threw a mattress downstairs. And basically, I could walk across the street from here to there every morning and be in the prison till nightfall. Actually, I could be there 24 hours if I wanted to. I had the privilege of leaving.
Yeah, it's quite amazing access. Liz, is it important that people watch this? I'm going to be honest with you. This is not an easy film to watch. Why is it important that people do watch it?
Well, interestingly, I've been working in prisons for 40 years, and I had trouble, and that's why people should see it. Those walls are there to keep the public out as much as to keep the prisoners in. And we pay for these prisons, and for people who are elderly in prison, we're paying twice as much, probably in New York $160,000 a year, because of the additional medical cost, the additional security that's related to the medical costs, which is completely insane when you're talking about people who literally could not possibly harm another person. They can barely harm a steak. And so people need to understand this is where your tax dollars are going. And also people need to understand that we have to look for some end to the vengeance. One of the things that's beautiful about this film to me was the people that were caring for Jack, because they were lifers also. And they were finally being given an opportunity to give back by caring for someone else. And we put people away for a very long time, and we say we're holding them accountable, but we're not. We're not giving them any responsibility at all. And these guys, people should see it just to see them.
That's true. Edgar, let me leave it with this. Jack admitted that he murdered someone, and we shouldn't take away from the fact that he did take a life. I mean, there are all sorts of nuances, which is another reason why people should look at the film, because he had a very difficult life himself. Did you reach out at all to the family of his victim? And, would you say anything to those who, would probably envy that kind of treatment, who are here and haven't done anything wrong, and, would like to have that same kind of end-of-life care, outside of prisons?
Well, I get that question a lot. Not necessarily if I contact the victim's family, because I have not. I did some research on the victim's family, and I'm sure they're out there. And I know this might sound irresponsible. I'm sure I'll hear from them possibly once the film is broadcast. But when it comes to people griping about the prisoners getting better care than we are on the outside, I have to say that it's not the prison's fault for doing that. I think we have to look at why people on the outside are getting bad health care. And I agree with Liz, absolutely. If this hospice program is the next best thing to medical parole or commutation, I personally believe that there should be commutation, much more of it, but it's very rarely done. And then hospice is actually probably a stopgap measure to make it at least dignified. But yeah, if it's up to me, I would love for these men to go back out, and be with their families if they're dying.
Well, let's let you at home decide. It's certainly a unique film, incredible access, and it was well done. So be sure to check out the Oscar-nominated Prison Terminal. It premieres on HBO this upcoming Monday, March 31st at 9 p.m. Thanks for being here.